upstairs, the two parish councils together. So there's plenty of, there's dessert up there, you want a piece of something? Because they'll be coming down in a little while. Yeah, we got remotes. We do PowerPoint to all masses on the weekend.
I wish I had known. I didn't know any of this. I would have.
Well, we didn't either, and all of a sudden I found out on Sunday.
Yeah, no. It was Nancy who said you had slides. I said, I wish I knew.
I'll show you what we got. So right now I just put that one together.
That's
So
great.
I could get it as big as I could, and I just slid this picture off to the side.
Great. That's perfect.
You know,
Okay, so
that was
that's.
the other one from yesterday.
Now I know. Yes. So,
You're going to use that again?
yeah, I think I'm going to use it.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah.
I'll say, you know what else? I'll say, Bob, could you put up the prayer, please?
Sure.
Okay. And so wait.
When do you want this other one up?
At the end, not till the end. And wait, I saw one with just the picture? Yeah, I might go with that.
How do you want these? Because I can change the rotation, the order.
I want the prayer first.
So you want that first?
Yeah. And then I want the picture.
And that?
But I have to ask for the picture, and again,
We
it's
don't-
going to be at the end. I don't know if I'll use that. If I use that, that will be number 3.
That'll be number 3.
If I use it.
So let's put these in the order you want.
So what's your story? You're the techie guy.
Okay, so you want the picture first?
No, I want the prayer first. gonna play the piano? Oh, how
I
exciting.
coordinated with her yesterday, said, you gonna be there? Yeah. I said, they want music, because she was up at Transfig last night, so she knows they play music, but
Yeah, they just.
as long as she's here, I'll do it.
Okay, Bob, how do you get rid of, come here a second. How do you get rid of the stuff on the side?
By starting the
Oh.
slide, by starting the program.
Okay. Thanks. Perfect. And I guess I'm just going to use this microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's on, too.
It's on, I just turned them on.
Thank you.
So, yeah, the biggest thing is make sure you're talking to the microphone. It's the biggest problem you have with people. They're afraid to talk into it. That's why it's there, so we can hear you. Our pleasure. It's not the first time. Oh, geez, can we do this?
Yeah, you got a light? Oh. Actually, I have a little flashlight, but I bet your light's better than my light. Should have known Bob was going to have the light, right?
Come and see what we've got.
Oh, that's right.
Revamping this space.
And your charging station. I had to. And I thought charging station right there, so you don't. And there's people here, so you don't need this.
Yes.
You get some more.
Fantastic. He's the man I can tell. Oh, thank you, Bob. I'm so glad you're here. For so many reasons. I sent you the Palm Sunday song list.
Oh, did you? Okay, I haven't looked.
You can just leave it on. Yeah, that's good.
It's brightest.
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
I should have Dan sing something. I should have Dan sing something.
Is he coming?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then.
You just park in the car.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I see you. Yeah. Not out of a Maria,
Not having.
or eagle's wings.
Have you heard those enough? We'll give you $1,000.
Yeah.
Okay. I left the soup supper and I saw the cars and went, good.
This is
Proper science seats.
Oh,
Try to
really?
mix up.
Oh, good.
And there's tables and people
Oh.
can't use yours.
Gee, has anyone ever stepped off and fell off this thing? I was just going to say, this is so narrow. You got to work on this, Bob. I'm not kidding you.
We did, you should have seen the original stuff.
Holy, you know what it is? It's this damn thing that comes out so far.
With those new gospel books.
Is that what it is? Okay.
This is the original.
Oh,
This
that's,
is the original.
yes,
added.
that was added. But
And
they forgot
this-
to add to the step.
Well, no. Well,
Can the thing go out further? No.
it's permanent,
Wow, Z.
but it was a narrow step. It was narrower than what this was, the original. And it didn't even come out that far. And
Okay.
of course, this wasn't there, so,
Yeah, hope I don't move.
and this was added after we built this. The other thing, we have I talked to you about Sister Barbara Moore.
Yeah,
She's short. So when she was up here, all you'd see is maybe
I believe it.
So we put a barber step
Ah,
for her.
that's the best. Let me stand on that.
It's really gonna put you up.
Oh, that's kind of
Like
nice.
it? She's,
No, that's
she's
a
moving up.
little too tall. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Very well. It went very well. How about your day?
I'm still looking for a little bit of oil.
Are you? We were in the chapel this morning. Thank you. What's her name again? The pianist.
Well, now you got to see what Rochester's
Pam?
like in the spring and the summer with the nice sunny day.
I walked along the river walk,
The canal.
the canal. Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, it's, well, you could go, it takes you all the way over, used to take you all the way over to.
Take you to Tonawanda or all the way to, well, Syracuse.
Wow.
It'll go beyond that.
Yeah,
You might get
it
a little
used to.
wet doing it.
Yeah, yeah, it used to be able to get to, from New York City up.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Walk along the Hudson, make a left.
It took them like 65 years, Chinese and Irish immigrants digging it.
Oh.
They used it for 10 years, and then the steam engine, the train took it over.
I know. Can you imagine after all that work?
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
it's like break my heart. Yeah.
So you had good crowds too.
Well, It's been about the same, 25 to 30 people, I would say, you
I
know.
wondered last night if the weather had anything to do with it, keeping numbers.
Yeah, I don't know what your usual numbers are. Usually you got,
More than that. So
yeah.
maybe people were online, that's what, we don't know that.
I know there were people online. Someone had said when they first clicked in, there were like 29, so I don't know.
That's good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you've seen it in a couple other places now, huh?
Yes, absolutely. It's a lovely little town and lovely area, beautiful area.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to St. Catherine of Siena. And on behalf of the Church of the Transfiguration, we have these 2 days of spiritual journey reflecting on the slow and brave work of forgiveness. So those of you who've been with us, we welcome you back. Those who might be here for the first time, we welcome you, and we're delighted that you can join our wonderful person who's reflecting on life and journey, Janet Corso. So, may we open our hearts and our spirits this Tuesday evening to continue to become forever changed. Nice warm welcome for Janet.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see return faces. I'm starting to recognize you from either morning, afternoon, night, whatever's going on. So it's delightful. And special thank you today to Pam for playing the lovely piano for us as we began. She came in to do that for us. And to Bob. I found out Bob is the jack of all trades here. And he's not only able to put the light up that I need, but make things easy for us with the not only the live streaming that's going on, but also any slides that I might have. So I'm grateful to Bob, and I'm grateful to all of you for turning out this evening, and welcome to those people who are live streaming again with us. This is part 2, so we shall see how it goes. Is anyone here for the first time this evening? Okay, good. So you can, if you want, eventually find the part 1, because some of this might be maybe a little tad confusing. I don't think so, though. Finding the part 1 on the website, and you can just pull that up because that's already been not taped. We don't use tape anymore, but it's somehow there by miracle. So this is a good thing. So we're going to start the way that we began last night, and that's just to take a moment to take a breath, all right? It's 7 o'clock at night. We've been running around all day. We come from busy lives, and here we are. So just take a breath and just notice how you begin. We allow God to gaze upon us for a moment. God is delighted that you're here. And so, Bob, if you would kindly put the prayer up for us. You have most of you, I think, have the handout sheet, and we're going to use the same prayer that we used last night. As we listen deeply to God's voice beneath all the other voices of our lives. So we pray together. Gracious and loving God, in obedience, let us listen deeply. Let us hear your invitation to greater freedom, recognizing your voice that is more gentle, yet more truthful than all the other voices without and within. As we struggle to forgive ourselves and others, remind us that you are close to us in our pain and suffering. And above all, allow us to hear your whisper that reminds us that we are ever and always your beloved. And I'm going to repeat something that I've said over and over again, that last line of understanding and believing that we are the beloved is the key to all of this, to all of forgiveness. Right? We have to really understand We're the beloved, otherwise it's hard for us not only to accept forgiveness, but to accept God's mercy and to forgive others too. And at the top of that sheet, I'll just remind you, is my email address, and JECorso@AOL, and it's there in case you want to email me afterwards, and I will send you some of the notes of the talk yesterday and the talk today, right? It's not the whole talk, so don't be disappointed, right? But it's some of the notes and some of the questions so that you can do further reflection for yourself, okay? So tonight we begin by talking about Jesus and what it was like for him to forgive, okay? And this is really important for us to remember because we often do this thing where we say, you know, Jesus and God forgiving is one thing and my forgiving is something else, and I'll never be able to match up. So as you're listening to this, try to hear, I'll give you maybe, 10 or 15 qualities of Jesus as he forgives. Notice if there's one or two in particular, right, that is jumping out at you, where we say the energy might be. Right, that's drawing you, that where you say to yourself, I think I need to develop that within myself. Because as we hear these qualities, that's what we need to be thinking, right? How can I emulate this? And the first thing we need to say is that because he was fully human and in human relationships with all sorts of people, those close and not close, he necessarily struggled with forgiveness. We don't think of that. We think of it as being easy for Jesus, but he had to if he was fully human. And we see this because he often gets frustrated with those close to him and those who are not close to him, right? So with the apostles, with the Pharisees, with everybody. He's frequently disappointed in them, and he also gets angry, right? We see this in a number of times. So what does that tell us, right? It tells us that it's okay, to love our imperfect family and friends, right? And to still acknowledge at the same time that sometimes we have poor relationships with them. And sometimes we're exhausted and drained and we're frustrated and we're upset by some of the shenanigans that they're up to, okay? And that's normal, and that's okay. That is not sinful, that is normal. How you act out of that might be a whole different story, all right? But Jesus experienced those things too. He had some wild behavior going on around him, from the best and the brightest and the not so much, okay? Jesus always tried to win the person and not the argument. And we know within ourselves sometimes we're all about winning the argument and being right. And he was always person-centered. He wasn't ego-driven. We talked a lot about the ego last night. He was not ego-driven, but internally free. That means he wasn't a fault finder. He wasn't a gossip. He wasn't bitter or resentful. And he always held people responsible for their actions by telling them when they were out of line. Telling them when they were out of line. So, do we need to emulate that? He was not afraid to name what needed naming without condemning. That's the important part with him. He was not about shaming. Most of us, when we point out something to someone, we shame at the same time, right? Which is not a good thing to do. He states what he sees, and often he lets people draw their own conclusion. He states it, he's clear about it, right? But he's never ambiguous where they say, gee, really, what is he trying to tell me? Usually when he's talking to someone, it's pretty clear about what he's saying. And why was this? Why was he willing to challenge folks? Because he wanted people to grow, right? So he challenges out of love for someone, not in order to get them, right? We should be doing the same. So let me just say a word about confrontation or confronting someone. When we approach or decide to confront someone who has hurt us, we have to do it like Jesus, out of love, right? And do it with compassion. And we do it because we believe that the person or the relationship deserves it. It's not so much about us, but us in the relationship and what we hope for with the person. And of course, the more meaningful the relationship, the more we should have the courage and take the risk to speak up because we want to deepen that relationship. Now, I know this sounds like really obvious, right? If you love somebody, you're going to speak up. You're going to tell them what you're seeing, okay? But I can't tell you how uncommon this is. I hear from people a lot how they think they're confused. They think in loving someone, they don't speak up, or they shouldn't speak up, or it's not going to do any good, or the person's only going to get upset, and what's the point anyway? So there are a million reasons, right? Plus, they want to preserve the relationship, so they keep silent. And here's the thing, right? Since Jesus is really interested in deeper relationships, which means intimacy with folks, right? That means transparency and authenticity. He's willing to approach them and tell them the truth, right? Tell them the truth. And that's a grace that he gives people. It's a grace we ourselves should be affording others too. So don't be confused and think to yourself, well, if I love someone, I don't confront them. Actually, the more you love them, the more you should be able to tell them the truth, okay? We'll talk about truth and compassion in a second here, but on the other hand, there's always another hand, right? On the other hand, there are plenty of times when we should not confront, okay? So we have to use good discernment. And what we do is we remember somebody hurts us, right? And instead of, getting in their face, we shouldn't be getting in their face anyway, but instead of, telling them how we feel, we should remember all of the times that someone cut us slack, right? When we were up to nonsense ourselves, there were people who enough to love us to overlook some of our craziness, right? I mean, if you're married, your spouse is doing this all the time, aren't they? They're picking their battles, right? They're not constantly telling you what you're doing wrong or where you're going off. But when it's important, they need to speak up. The stronger and more mature your ego and the more spiritually developed you are, the less sensitive and easily hurt you will be. Okay? Meaning, the thin-skinned people, and we all know thin-skinned people, you look at them crooked, you look at them, askance, and they're like horrified and want an apology, right? Maybe I'm hanging out with the wrong group. I know people like this, though. And then you start walking on eggshells with them because they're so sensitive, okay? They're constantly offended. That's not the sign of spiritual maturity. That's not, right? Nor is it of a more mature ego. So do confront, but confront for the right reasons. Not because your ego's in the way and you need to get this off your chest. It's not about that. It's out of love for the other person and the relationship. I love you so much, I'm going to tell you this. And the other person goes, okay, right? Go ahead, tell me what it is. But they can hear it because of how you're doing it, hopefully. Let's go back to Jesus. He challenged people to give up their attachments. We were talking last night about one of the pieces of the ego is always attached to so many different things, especially in forgiving. So he invites us to give up our attachments, and by the time we die, it all has to go, right? We have to give up everything. Everything must go. So whether it's a belief we have, whether it's a thing, whether it's whatever, our families, whatever. He invites people to give up their childishness, their immaturity, to become childlike. That means to be simple, right? Not complicated, not over anything, not over dramatic, etc. That takes maturity. Marion Woodman has a great line. She says, God doesn't run a daycare center, meaning that God expects all of us to step up, to be adults, and to move towards maturity. Right? This is the expectation in the spiritual life. He invited people to give up their faith as they knew it, a faith that was secure, a faith that kept people warm and fuzzy and cozy, to risk a deeper, more authentic faith. He always respected people's freedom by extending invitations, not commanding, not giving ultimatums. How many times have we done that? Maybe you've done it with your kids, or you've done it with, well, actually your kids are probably the only ones you can get away with ultimatums with. Other adults wouldn't put up with that kind of thing. But Jesus was never about that. Right? Jesus was about offering a choice, an invitation, and then leaving the person free to say yes or to say no. Mary could have said no when the angel came, right? She was standing on the edge of a choice, and she said yes. But this is the story, again, of the rich young man, right? Who walks away, right? Who gets the invitation, and he makes the choice, and he walks away. Jesus does not enable, and he's not codependent. He doesn't tell us the truth. He doesn't look at us and tell us what we need to hear. And then, we walk away, or the next day he doesn't come running after us and say, sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm going to take that back, right? No. He allows us to hold whatever the truth is, assuming that we can hold it, right? Trusting that we can hold it. He's more interested in the spirit of the law, mercy, than in the letter of the law. This is the whole thing with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They had gone to the extreme with laws and in the interpretation of laws. And Jesus always says this is more about, the person as opposed to the law. He keeps it simple. The message is always clear, direct, and uncomplicated. I have directees who sometimes wonder, I don't know if this is in my head, they'll say, or if God is really talking to me. And I always tell them, God will be simple, clear, usually short, right? Not paragraphs. God speaks simply, clearly, but definitively, unequivocally. There was that program, The Chosen. I've only seen the first episode, but that's, the story of Jesus, and it's on TV. And in the first episode that I saw, there was Mary Magdalene, who was already having a hard time right in the beginning. You're feeling badly for her. And she walks into what I guess is the local bar, right? And she sits down there. I thought, this is clever, right? She sits down there. You're getting the feel of her, though. And she has her glass of wine. And then, talking to the bartender and pretty down. And then he's pouring her another one. And this man is standing next to her. And it ends up being Jesus, right? And he turns to her. And he just simply says, you don't need that anymore. That's it. Not, what are you doing? How could you possibly have another drink? You've already had some. None of that. None of that. Just, you don't need that anymore. I had a directee recently who was describing how she was feeling in her life, and she said, because of what was happening at home and with her family and at work, she really felt like she was being painted in the corner, right? So I said, well, describe that to me. And she said, well, there's paint all over, there's just little spots without it over there and over here, but where I am, it's just filled up with paint. And then she said, but then I was praying, she said, and I saw Jesus, and he simply said to me, come over here with me. That was it. come over here with me. And she said, do you think that was real? I said, do you think it was real? She said, yeah, but it was so simple and it was clear, okay? And that's how God talks, simply and clearly. Jesus' message about forgiveness, which appears so many times, right, in the New Testament, is urgent. We see many examples of urgency in the New Testament, not rushing along, but hurrying, right? Mary to the foothills, right? And we said Peter and John to the tomb, because it's urgent, because time's ticking, because there's not a moment to spare, right? I mean, I certainly know this as I'm aging. There's not a minute to spare anymore. And even when you're young, you think you have all this time. But the message of forgiveness is urgent, right? If not now, when? And he never gives his power away. All right. He always remains in his power, which is God-centered. He knows when to speak, when to be silent, and when to respond, not react. You don't see Jesus reacting, right? You see Jesus responding. It's considered because it's coming from a grounded center of power. Let me just say a word or two about power, because power is connected with forgiveness work because it's connected with love, you know. It's easy, of course, to misuse power, but it's also easy for us, especially as Christians, not to claim power, not to claim it, okay? And so I think we're befuddled often as Christians about power. We do sometimes one of two things. We either demonize it and fear power, right? Or we co-opt the cultural type of power. The cultural type of power is an ego power, power over, right? And there's certainly lots of examples of domineering, you know, destructive sort of power let loose in the universe, you know, in the world now, the corrupting sort of kind. But we need to be empowered in order to love and take risks. And forgiving is a very risky sort of thing. Love means being strong enough to be aligned with the truth. And this is what Christ was, right? Aligned with the truth at all times, right? So he was able to fiercely defend, right? Fiercely defend the most vulnerable and the most at-risk sort of people. He was in opposition to cultural power and the values of cultural power. So he was not nice, okay? Now we're nice. I mean, he was kind and he was good, but we're trying to be kind, good, and nice too. And that's not always possible. He was actively assertive and powerful. So true powerlessness comes from a place of surrender of the ego. This is what we were talking about last night. But not because you feel of little value, or you're refusing to claim the power that God wishes you to use in an appropriate way. Power and passion are needed to support our loving, our forgiving, and our standing up to injustice. Okay? So, those are the qualities, I don't know how many there were, of Jesus. I'm sure there are many more if we, you know, thought about it. But they're the qualities that we're asked to emulate. We're asked to, if we're on the way, and we're supposed to be like Jesus, this is what we are called to do. So let's just stop for a minute. Just take a moment. Was there any one of those that you heard that was maybe the most challenging to you? What could that be? Now, sometimes what happens is We gravitate towards the one we like, right? Or the one we're already doing. But when I say listen for the energy, right? The energy that attracts you to maybe one of these, and this would be in the handout that I'd send you if you want it. To the energy of one of these, that's attractive, but also you need to be attentive to the energy of the one you really don't like. I could never do that. It's the I could never do that one that you need to spend a little time with, right? Because maybe that's where the challenge is for you. There's something maybe within you that would resist that one, that for you would not be so attractive, but maybe that's the particular one God wants you to hear. I don't know. So this is something you can reflect on through these days. How can I emulate Jesus in his forgiveness? How can I be like that? Power and love are connected to self-forgiveness. So I just want to say a few words about self-forgiveness, because I don't know if I had mentioned to this group that, sometimes forgiving ourselves is much more difficult than forgiving others. I can't tell you how many people come in and talk, and they really, really do the hard work of forgiving others, but they just can't do it for themselves. And it's the saddest thing, right? Now, we all live with regrets. That is the case. That's the truth. But not forgiving ourselves does a few things, right? It's self-punitive not to forgive yourself. It's a way of self-betraying. And sometimes it's a way of carrying on the trauma that's just been done to you anyway, right? Or has just happened. So this incident that you did, who knows, 50, 80 years ago, or maybe not that far, 20 years ago, right, is traumatic enough if you're still carrying it. But not to forgive yourself, in a sense, re-traumatizes you, right? But it's a further punishment that goes on. Another thing that not forgiving yourself does is it tries to put you in the place of God. If you tell somebody, well, God has already forgiven you for this, and a long time ago, on one level they'll say, oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful. Do you believe it? Well, I don't know if I believe it. I mean, I like the idea. The idea is a good one. But if I really believed it, that means I would have to release it and let it go, right? If I'm really forgiven, I'm going to have to let this go. And people are often wedded to that, whatever that might be, all right? So you don't want to out-God God, right? If God says you're forgiven, then you don't have to try to be more godly to continue to punish yourself. You follow me on this? What it does is it kind of tells you then what's going on with your image of God. It sort of means maybe that you don't really fully believe that God has already forgiven you, right? If God were up on his game, he wouldn't have forgiven me, because after all, you know what I did. I did the worst thing in the world. And maybe you have done the worst thing in the world, right? But God forgives it all. Not forgiving ourselves disallows for growth and maturity, right? Think of the crazy things you did when you were 20, right? 30, 5 years ago even, right? You're not necessarily the same person. God bless you, right? You have to account for growth and maturity. The question to ask is, would you do the same thing today that you did then? You'd go, oh my goodness, I would never do that again, right? Or, I don't know, if the answer is yes, then, that there might not be a problem here, right? But if you're saying, oh no, I would never do that again, right? That shows that there has been change, right? Perhaps you've grown in wisdom. So you need to allow yourself that grace of development. And the last thing not forgiving yourself does is it's a distraction, a false type of what we call a neurotic suffering, carrying the wrong cross often. Okay. So let's say you've done something and you really feel badly about it. What you're called to do is repent, make amends if you can go back in some way and fix it, right? If that's possible, to do whatever you need to do, to make it right. and then to let it go, to do the grieving work, etc. But if you stay in the cycle, it's like the spin cycle on the washing machine, I guess. If you stay in the cycle of, oh, I'll never forgive myself, this is the worst in the world, I'll never, right? You're carrying the wrong cross. The other cross is actually harder to carry, right? Because it invites you to do the deep work of staying with the sorrow underneath the action in order to move through it. Do you understand that? So I can stay stuck for a very, very long time, ruminating on this for the rest of my life, right? And really what I'm afraid to do, okay, is pick up the cross that's mine and really embrace that and be with that. Does that make sense to you? I know, because this is, things that I not only remind people of, I remind myself of all of this too. Okay, so we're all in the same boat. If we don't forgive ourselves, the internalized voices of hardness take over, right? Judgmental, shaming voices, right? How could you do that? How could you do that, right? Right, as if you were the queen of everything, that you shouldn't do that, right? I mean, you're as human as anyone else. That's not the same as a tough voice inside of us. The tough voice is not shaming, right? Being tough on ourselves is holding ourselves accountable and being willing to pay the price, whatever that price is. But that's not the same as a hardness towards ourselves. You'll see I'm doing a bunch of pieces here now that have to do with forgiveness, all right? So that we're not confused about how to forgive, and because the process involves so much. And one of the pieces of the process involves apologies, okay? So I want to give you an example. It's really important for us to be apologizing for the right thing. Recently, I'd say within the last month, a woman whom I've seen for direction for over the past, I'd say 10 years, came in and she was extremely distraught, right? And she was distraught because she lied to her husband and she was caught in the lie. She had made arrangements with a good friend of hers to take a trip to Ireland, and they were both looking forward to it. But she knew her husband was controlling. Her husband wouldn't want her to go, right, for whatever bizarre reasons, right? She was using her own money. But this was the kind of guy he was, right? And he would make a big fuss over it. So she planned on telling him. She just hadn't gotten to it yet. And what does he find? The itinerary, right? It's like, oh, Lord, right? Oh, boy. So she came in, and she was truly upset because he was so upset. Right? You lied to me. How could you lie to me? Look what it's done to the marriage. Da, 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 da. But when she she figured her task was being, apologizing to him and then forgiving herself for having lied. Da, 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 da. When she sat with it, however, over time, she realized that wasn't what she had to apologize for. That wasn't the biggest issue going on, right? It was what was beneath that lie that she needed to apologize for, right? So she indeed went back to the husband and apologized to him. I shouldn't have lied to you. But then she said, but what I really need to apologize to you for is being a partner in this dysfunctional dance that we've been in, right? You have tried to control, basically, my life and my choices and what I'm up to and blah, 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 right? And I moved to a childish position and then start hiding things so you don't get mad, right? She said, look at this dance we've been up to. That's what I need to apologize for. I'm sorry for my part in that. That led me, lying was not right, I agree, but that led me to that. That's what we really need to look at. Okay, so on the surface, it looked like she needed to apologize for one thing. I hope you're getting this. But underneath, right, was the bigger issue. That's where the freedom came then for her, once she like wakes up to this, what the heck has been going on here, right? And how do I stop doing that? And how do I stop doing that with you, right? That's where the freedom came in, okay? So make sure you're apologizing for the right thing. Sometimes scratch underneath an issue, right? You see this with your kids all the time, right? They're upset about something, la, 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 la. And you as a wise parent say, okay, what are you really upset about, right? What's really going on? No, it's really about Mary Luna. And yeah, okay, what's really going on? Well, I failed a math test today. Okay, right? So you do that with the kid. So you need to do it here too. When we've been wronged, we need to assume that people need time and space to apologize. Okay, a quick apology may be insincere or just defensive, maybe just an explanation more than an apology. Right? So as the person who's been wronged, we hope for, right, a sincere apology. The wronged person must hold the tension of all the feelings that are coming up after they've been hurt and wait. But Harriet Lerner reminds us, she says, longing for a genuine and sincere apology, validation, or an affirming response is totally understandable, but is unrealistic. The only reason to confront and speak our truth is because we need to, or feel we must, or it's the right thing to do. Okay? So we hope for, but we're not attached to a certain outcome. The person might never give us an apology. It might never happen, right? I'm sure you know people like this, or situations maybe in your own life, right? Likewise, the one offering an apology cannot expect forgiveness. That's a gift and a grace that's freely given by the one who's been injured, right? So if you've hurt somebody, you're off the high horse anyway. Don't try to climb back on and expect them to forgive you. Hopefully they will, right? Hopefully they will. When we apologize, just think about what we said about Jesus. We have to avoid blame shifting or minimizing or justifying or explaining what we've been up to, right? So you've heard people apologize, but start off by saying, oh, you're hurt by that little thing. Oh, gee, you must be so sensitive. Why would you get hurt by that? They're minimizing your hurt, right? They're minimizing your feelings. Or they start apologizing. This is their apology. They say, well, I'm sorry if you're upset, meaning if you were a normal person, you wouldn't be upset, right? Or they say, I'm sorry, but, right? I'm sorry, but, right? La, 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 la. You're explaining and justifying. Those are two separate things. You give the explanation about 5 hours later over dinner. You never follow an I'm sorry or an apology with a but. It's not the time. Are you sorry or are you not sorry? Are you taking responsibility and I know there are good reasons why things happen. Like, let's say you're late for lunch with a friend, right? Because, I don't know, the train was this and the flat tire and all the rest of the stuff, right? But they want to hear, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry, right? I'm sorry that I'm late. You must have had to sit here and eat the wonderful hors d'oeuvres without me, you poor thing. But really, that's what they want to hear. And then later on, when you're on the entree, then you say, yeah, the train broke down, da-da-da-da-da. But by not coupling the two, you're not mitigating the apology. An apology needs to be a true giving of your sorrow. But one of the most difficult pieces and most important pieces for healing and in apology is to be able to stand there and witness the other person's pain. You caused the harm. Now you have to have the fallout. You have to get it. Hopefully they're not screaming and yelling at you. You need to hear their pain, though, whatever their pain is, because you've caused that pain. So it's a matter of standing there in humility with an open heart and sharing their suffering. You need to hear what you did, is what it is. This is part of the truth in order to be able to reconcile, right? The truth. This is interesting. There was a study that was recently done about people's willingness to be able to apologize and to feel remorse. And listen to this. We are more likely to accept responsibility, to feel remorse and apologize if we can view ourselves as more than our sin. We must have a platform of self-worth and acceptance to stand on. So if I see myself in your eyes as having lied, it's very different than feeling I'm a liar and no good, right? Can you feel the difference? To take on an identity not defined by our worst deeds or sins is a healthy act of resistance. We cannot survive when our identity is defined by or limited to our worst behavior. How can we apologize for something we are, that's shame, rather than something we did, that's guilt, right? Do you hear it? Right? If I believe that you see me as worthless, and therefore see me as not worthy in some way, right? I'm going to have a hard time apologizing. What this means is we need to feel the beloved of God. We need to feel that in our families too. We need to have the strong enough ego in order to be able to apologize, right? The more worthless a person feels, the less they're apt to apologize, because they only have this much left, right? This much left, and they're going to cling to it. Right? Do you understand that? If I lied, it's different than if you see me as a liar. If you see me as a liar, you've just branded me, and, right, that's my identity. Finally, God always desires to reconcile with us. You're going to have tomorrow, I believe it's at 7 o'clock here, your reconciliation sacrament, right, which will be a fitting end to everything that's been going on for the last couple of days. And to remember that God never severs the relationship, no matter how far we've strayed as the wandering sheep, right? Or how unworthy we feel, etc. So with people, we always seek restoration. Right? We always try to seek that. But we may have to make decisions, this is the case, that prioritize or protect ourselves or others within our families' mental or physical well-being. So if it's not truly possible to reconcile with someone, we can certainly forgive them, but we might have to obviously release the relationship. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you assume the same level of relationship, right? Doesn't make sense. Perhaps it's going to get better. I mean, that's the hope. It's not going to stay here. It's going to get even better, or perhaps the relationship would be released. We might not be able to reconcile if the other person is unwilling or unrepentant or is even deceased, right? So many of my directees are doing forgiveness work with those who have passed to the other side, with those who are deceased. It couldn't happen in this life for any number of reasons. That doesn't mean the work is finished, though, because they need the freedom. And often there'll be a ritual at the end if they can get that far of forgiving, right? They might eventually go to the grave or whatever they need to do to be able to speak to the other person. When we release somebody, we release them to God. We just don't release them as if we're kicking them out the door. We release them to God. What you can't do, hopefully God can. And if appropriate, Did you hear the capital letters there? If appropriate, we hold our hearts open for future reconciliation. Not for everyone, right? But as much as we possibly can when appropriate. Closing our hearts permanently in rejection can continue the trauma cycle sometimes for generations. It just goes on, and it's passed on. People forget, oh, why is it that we don't like that family? What happened with Uncle Lou? What was that about? I don't know, but, that kind of stuff. But this is a matter of careful and prayerful and ongoing discernment. Let me give you an example. I have a directee who 5 years ago had a falling out with her son. And since that time, they went to mediation, right? And they went to therapy to try to put it back together. And the son has basically written her off. She's a good woman. I'm sure the son is a good son in his own way, right? She's heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken, because she's cut off from the children too. He cut off the mother, he cut off the father, and he cut off his brother and their family too. So it's a mess. It's a big mess, right? So he made that decision to do that. She's since apologized 14 ways to know how and admits it was her fault, right? But he made the decision, I don't want to be in contact with you. And after a couple of years, she realized that she had the right to make her decision too, right? That she had just been following what he said was going to go, right? She'd been honoring that. So she decided to move ahead, honoring as much as she could his decision while making a choice of her own. And her choice was to continue to let him know that the door was always open to him. So occasionally, not every week, right? Not even every month, like every 6 weeks or so, she would drop him a note saying, I'm thinking of you and your family. Please know that Dad and I, still love you. The door is always open. This is the prodigal, son kind of thing. I'm sorry to tell you that, she's been doing this for over a year. I wish I could tell you that, he's come back and everything's, wonderful. But this is not a story about that anyway. This is a story about what she felt she needed to do for herself to continue to let him know that. Now, she's not calling him on the phone. She's not bothering his life and all the rest of that. But she's letting him know, and don't forget the door is open. And don't forget we love you. So what that means is you have a choice, even when somebody, and they could always throw it in the garbage. They go like this, throw it in the garbage. That's up to them, right? These are hard decisions and cases, right? But God puts us in a position where we sometimes have to struggle with these things. We have to discern them and make some hard decisions around them. So let's just stop again and take a moment. You're hearing a lot. Is there something in your life now where you feel you're being called to move ahead in forgiving? Move ahead in some way. You don't have to know how, but just see, is there something, either self-forgiveness or forgiving another, that you're being invited to move ahead on? And whatever that might be, I encourage you, if something is coming up, I encourage you to take that as God's whisper, God's little nudge, to just begin to explore that a little bit more. Whatever that means, just explore it in your time. I want to do a couple of things. We have some time left, and I'll give you a chance to ask some questions. And one is to just talk about a few forgiveness practices. Now, you might already be practicing these sorts of things, and you might have practices of your own, which are wonderful. We're all, we all find ways to help us forgive, right? So one of them is just praying for the desire to forgive. I think I had told you before that sometimes people spend even a long period of time just with the desire, God, help me to want to forgive. I'm not even at the point where I can do this yet, but help me to want to do that, okay? And that's okay, right? That's okay. You're not going to stay there forever, hopefully. Hopefully you'll move, but that's a good starting place. And nothing to be ashamed of. Right? Another thing you might do is to practice in your prayer, doing a contemplative sort of prayer and a type of visualization, where, especially if there's someone that's hard to pray for, you picture them, just simply allow yourself to see God as a loving presence, maybe white light or, the gentleness of God, and just allow that person to come into the picture and stand before God. You're observing, all right? You're just watching. You don't have to be engaged in what's going on. You're watching. And just see what happens as God's love is upon them. Maybe that's all that can happen for a long time. That's all you can stand to see. I don't know. It depends on what's happening, right? Perhaps the day comes when you can also step into that picture. But what does God say to that person? What does God say to you and to that person at the same time? All right? You have to do this kind of stuff very slowly and very gently and know where your limit is, right? Right? So you don't say, okay, I got to forgive so-and-so, and so we'll stand before God. That could be too much. I mean that seriously. If you want it to be real, then you have to do it gently. Another thing, I'll give you two more examples. Another thing you might do is when you want to forgive yourself, to do an Ignatian type of contemplation of imagery, right? Of just maybe thinking of a favorite place, especially outdoors by a lake or if you're in your garden or whatever. Just sit and just in prayer, just visualize yourself there. Put in all the details, hear the birds and see the color of the water and hear the waves, that kind of thing. And sit yourself down on a bench there, an imaginary bench, right? And then allow God to come and sit beside you, right? Just to sit down beside you, right? And look together, the two of you, out at the scenery. Sit in that delight for a few minutes. And then when you're ready, just tell God what's either on your mind or in your heart that you want to speak about, especially about your own self-forgiveness. And then just listen. Listen to what God says. But one of the questions to ask God that sometimes we never even think of is, what is my suffering like for you? How do you feel when you watch me wrestle with this self-forgiveness or wrestle with this forgiveness or am suffering or wounded? What is it like for you to watch me go through this? If this is a loving God, you're going to be surprised by the answer. Now, it's amazing to me that we don't think to ask God this. What's it like for you? What was it like for you, God, to watch me, dance at my daughter's wedding? What was that like for you, right? What was that like for you, God, when? Because most of us think God's not really watching us. There's so many problems in the world. God's watching the poor, right? God's taking care of God's busy. God's busy in the Ukraine now, et cetera. And I'm not saying God's not busy there. But if we really believe that God is with the brokenhearted and can feel pain and is with us in our suffering, just like you would ask a friend, what was it like for you when you watched me go through my cancer treatments, or you saw me in the hospital, Or what was it like for you when you saw me go through, right? You'd say that to a friend, and they'd say, oh, let me tell you what it was like. It was no picnic, honey, right? It was tough, right? La, 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 la. They're telling you how much they love you. That's what they're telling you, right? So ask God, what was it like for you? You're going to hear an earful. Be ready to hear it and accept it, right? And then say to God whatever you want to say. If you want to lean into God, if you want God to put his arm around you, whatever that might be, right? Whatever you're comfortable with. One of the nice things, isn't it, about a mature spirituality, and to tell you the truth about getting older, is you get to such a comfortable place with God that sometimes even words aren't necessary anymore, right? It's like you're the old married couple, right? Sitting there. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Sometimes I think God needs us also to listen to his pain, right? Who's listening? Who's listening? Can you be that listening ear sometimes for God? Come and sit down, God. I'm ready, right? I'm ready. Lean into me. I'll lean into you. How's that? Okay? So do that for yourself, and let that be a type of comfort, and for God to help you with your self-healing. Another thing that I really won't go into, because I want to do the little piece of scripture, is do a station of the cross, or do a sorrowful mystery of your own life. Of your own life. Now, maybe you've done this before, right? Where have you fallen? What has been the heaviest cross you've carried in this forgiveness work? Who wiped your face? Who's been there for you, right? Who has been at your own crucifixion and taken you down and laid you, in a soft place of hope? Who has done that for you? So there is much for you to hold in your own life and to bring before God. And it's not in any way sacrilegious for you to associate it with Christ's journey. In fact, Christ is, I'm sure delighted by that kind of thing, because it's the Christ within you, we said, that does this forgiveness work. Bob, if you would be so kind to put that picture up. On the handout that you have, on the second page of that handout is a picture, right? And here is, let me read you the scripture as you look at the picture. If you look at the picture up here, I love that it's projected, right? It's that short piece from Luke 13. This isn't the whole gospel. This isn't the whole reading. Then it goes on to the craziness that happens. And a woman was out there outside the temple who had been crippled for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. Just keep watching the picture. And when Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Boy, how apropos the bells, right? She immediately. So here's the frozen Kodak moment, right? She's just about to stand up straight. Isn't that the best? And look, her cane, her stick has dropped, right? Jesus is holding her up. The light is around them and between them both. He has come down to her level, right? He's eye to eye with her. He's not waiting for her. He's not waiting for her to join him. He comes to her level. And the next picture, the next slide, which of course we don't have, is she's standing up straight, right? So what needs to happen in you within the next 10 days or so as Palm Sunday comes and we move into the Triduum? What needs to happen within you to be able to stand up straight, to stand in the empowerment of Christ, in order for you to forgive yourself, forgive others, right? And stand tall in the freedom, that only the Christ can give. Okay? So that's the question for you to take with you. It's a reflection question that's on that sheet there. You know, not only why has God drawn me here through these days, but what is it that will help me to stand up tall? What's the next move for me? What do I need to hold? What do I need to release? What's the cane I need to drop finally? Drop the cane, right? And how do I need to stand up in my, in my power, in my wisdom and strength in Christ? So, I will do a final prayer with you in a moment, but let's take a minute to let some of this settle and see if there's a question or a comment that you'd like to verbalize. And I know I have to say it into the microphone if somebody asks a question so everybody can hear it. So just take a moment, see what's stirring inside, if there's a question or comment bubbling up. Anyone? You're like that A student in class. You can't see her folks at home, but it's the same person as last night. Wait, let's go with Lisa first, then we have another question. Go ahead, Lisa. Yeah. With institutional forgiveness, right? Well, the institution, whatever the institution is, right? Institutions basically all look the same because they're institutions, right? That's why they're not called something else. And so sometimes we feel like we're dealing with a bureaucracy when we're dealing with an institution. Sometimes it doesn't institution to be able to hear, truly hear, the needs of the others in the institution. If you don't get that, though, it's hard to have a type of true reconciliation. People need to feel that they're being heard. If they're being heard and they have some sort of an input, there's much more of a chance that the institutional side can see the errors of their ways, not necessarily, change things so drastically, but to say sincerely, we are sorry, as opposed to just explaining, this is why we did X, Y, and Z, right? Saying, this is the explanation, here's the explanation, it's like, good luck with that, right? But it goes a long way if you feel that you're being heard and the institution through representatives can apologize. It's tough, though. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done really poorly, right? All of it depends on who's running the show. Tough. See, institutions can often hide because they've got the rules, regulations, and, right, depends on the institution. I saw another hand. Yes. That's a great question. So the question was, Lisa had asked the question about how do you reconcile and do forgiveness work with an institution? And this gentleman is asking a question about, is forgiveness like grieving work? Are there stages? But how do you know when you've reached the end of forgiveness? Well, first, let me answer that question first. You know because of the sense of spaciousness and freedom inside of you. When the emotions that you feel are in no way as hot as they were initially around a particular subject or whatever it might have been. You see the person and you no longer filled with animosity or whatever the case might have been, right? So there's been an acceptance and a releasing of feelings. Hopefully you've been through a big, long process. I would not say there are stages of it because stages look pretty linear, and this is more 2 steps forward, 1 step back. and spiraling more than anything. In other words, going around to those feelings. So you work through your anger and you work through your grief, and a lot of this is grief work. You work through that, right? And you think you're done, and it's like, wow. And then, 2 months later, you see them dancing with so-and-so, and you're like, oh boy, there I am again, right? And it's like, well, I guess I'm not done. Guess you're not. Are you free? You feel you're free? Can you dance at their wedding yet? Well, that might never happen, but internally when you have the freedom, when you can bless them on their way, right? So it's having a good barometer. Sometimes our barometer's off, right? But usually most of us know when we're pretty well there. Also ask God, what do you think, God? Do you think I'm done with this? I'm serious. Ask God the question. God loves to be asked questions. People don't ask God questions because they assume they know the answer. Ask God the question and be surprised by what you hear. Another question? Yeah. Okay. You know what's going to happen. On the way home, you're going to think of 4 questions. This is why you have my email address. Okay? Seriously. It's been a privilege and it's been a pleasure to spend this time with you, these days with you. I wish you a blessed rest of Lent. I know you'll be back here tomorrow night for your reconciliation, and I will be thinking of you at Easter. May you have a graced Easter and a graced Easter season. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out these past 2 days, and much gratitude to Janet for being here, and for Damien Zinda, who recommended the gifts and fruitfulness that Janet could bring to us in these Lenten journeys. I'd like to also thank Karen Reinford and Lisa Morris and Jen Yates, who have helped prepare this time that we share with one another. Slow, brave work of forgiveness. Ken, your question was very poignant this evening. And I think that's one that can resonate in all our spirits as we go forth in this closure of our Lenten season and get ready to go to the gates of our Holy Week. So again, thank you, Janet, for being here. God bless you and the joys ahead. And to everyone else, too, thank you for coming. And I pray that we'll continue to become fully changed with one another. God bless your journey.